Are you good? All right. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Municipal Authority to order. And the first item of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Crispin.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Crispin, thank you very much. First item of business will be the approval of minutes for the date of September 11th, 2018. Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we accept the minutes of September the 11th, 2018 is prepared and circulated.
There's a motion by Mr. Crispin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Eby. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next item of business will be public comment for the masses of people in the audience. If you have anything you'd like to discuss that is an item that is not on the agenda this evening, you can come to the podium and express your concerns or anything that you'd like to talk about. Seeing that there is none, we will move to board member comments. Any board member comments? I do have a few comments I'd like to make. First comment will be that our authority director, Mr. Weaver, it's his birthday today. So, Mr. Weaver, happy birthday. Do you want to tell everybody how old you are?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Blaine. I appreciate it. My daughter was going to come sing a public comment, but I talked her out of it. But thank you for recognizing me.
What a
Mr.
way
Weaver.
to spend your birthday with all your friends.
In an authority meeting, no less.
Right.
And
Beautiful
nationally, and Mr. Weaver, your birthday is being nationally televised.
Yeah. Second matter I wanted to just present to everybody is I received this notification, so did Mr. Weaver, on Friday from Mr. Horning. Subject is resignation. And let me read you Mr. Horning's resignation letter. Due to moving forward to refocus my efforts to areas that have a more eternal consequences, such as my grandchildren in CASA, which is the court-appointed special advocate, I'm resigning from the authority board. We had many great experiences on the authority, especially with the staff. From George Wolf's and Bill Weaver's abilities to accomplish what can only be called amazing, to the techs who use not only their hands but their minds to solve problems and achieve their amazing results. It was truly a delight to have worked with such a fine, high-integrity people. Together with other authority members, we achieved savings in the millions of dollars for residents. We stepped outside government's no-risk policy and experimented with other methods to achieve even greater results. To take an existing staff performing at record levels of $3 million per year of rehab to over times $10 million a year, taking advantage of up to 15% reductions in bid prices was almost unbelievable. And to add to that, was done with little complaints from residents and a true testament of the efforts of every person who worked for the authority. With that, I thank and commend all the authority on a job well done, and thank them for teaching me how to get her done. So I just want to say, publicly, I've served with Bill Horning for, close to 20 years now, either on the authority board or as a township supervisor. And I want to just give a public thank you to Bill Horning and his service to Lower Paxton Township. Bill, having served with Bill, I can tell you, Bill was committed to the township, was committed to the mission of what we were doing here in the municipality, and Bill's sense of understanding on the financial side, but also with his background as an engineer, really brought a lot to the table. And I appreciated my time serving with Bill, and I just want to say thank you to Bill and the time and what he gave to Lower Paxton Township. So. All right.
Mr. Blaine, will we be taking applications to fill his
Yeah,
position?
so that was the other thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Miss Lindsay.
Before you go to that, Ernie, may I make a comment about Mr. Horning also? Or
Yes, you may.
Thank
Yes,
you.
may, Mr. President.
I also would publicly like to thank Mr. Horning for, again, my association with him for more than 20 years, also as you have, Mr. Blaine, for the public service he has given to this community. He was very dedicated, And his interest was always what is in the best interest of the township. He never had any desires for self-satisfaction or self-edification or self-promotion. It was always what was in the best interest of this community. And so I would like to publicly thank him for the public service that he has given to us for more than 20 years to this municipality, both on the authority and as a township supervisor. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. To follow up on Ms. Lindsay's point, we will be entertaining applications to fill the vacant position left by Mr. Horning. Everybody can go on, anybody interested can go onto the township's website, fill out an application, submit it to Lower Paxton Township for review. There'll be appointments for positions in January when the supervisors make appointments, and that will be evaluated at that point in time. But at this point, we would be accepting applications.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. On to first item. What we're going to look at is the general authority. For those in TV land, we're breaking out the agenda between the general authority and the sanitary sewer fund and stormwater fund. So the first line of business that we are going to do is action to appoint Bradley Gottshaw as the authority manager. Mr. Gottshaw, do you want to add anything? Now you are the township manager and soon to be authority manager. Anything you'd like to?
No, I mean, I guess I can possibly thank the authority for this action tonight. I've been with the township now for a few weeks anyway, and getting to know township staff as well as, of course, staff specifically related to the sewer operations and stormwater operations, which both are of top-notch quality. And so I look forward to working with the authority going forward.
Okay. Mr. Gottshaw, thank you very much. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve Mr. Gottshaw as the authority manager.
Mr. Chairman, I was waiting for that pregnant pause. I was just hesitating whether we should move forward with this action. Mr. Chairman, I'll move forward to appoint Bradley Gottshaw as our authority manager.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second by Mr. Eby. Is there any further comments or discussion? With that, we can take this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Well, Mr. Gottshaw, I don't know if it's good or bad, but you now are the authority manager. So,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, and maybe this is a question that needs to go to solicitor. When we move to this, to the other authority with stormwater, will we have to do that again? Or will this be satisfactory for both?
It's for both,
Okay, only because it says,
because the authority manager is
It's under the
entire authority.
okay, I just wanted clarification, so in case we needed to do it, we could have either made it in that motion or whether I needed a second, but it's already,
The two parts of the authority are the authority.
okay.
well, Mr.
Thank you,
Gottshaw,
Mr. Chairman.
no problem, sir. Mr. Gottshaw, welcome aboard. Look forward to working with you. So, next line of business will be action on an amendment of the management agreement with Lower Paxton Township, adding stormwater operations and adding in additional township administrative employees for sanitary sewer operations. Mr. Wolf.
Mr. Chairman, authority members, good evening. This is the second time you've seen a management agreement amendment. This is a little bit different than what you've seen previously in that the first amendment that we showed you was an amendment to the existing agreement, which dates back to 1997, and that amendment was adding in the stormwater service. At Mr. Weaver's suggestion, we decided at staff level, Bill, Mr. Stein, and myself, that we would incorporate the whole amendment for stormwater into a recodified document incorporating the original agreement from 97, an amendment from 97, and the stormwater management agreement that you previously saw at your last meeting. So you have a comprehensive agreement before you this evening in new form. This won't be an amendment. This will be a whole new agreement from the one that you have in place now. Differences, though, are, from a policy perspective, are negligible. It adds in the stormwater service to the sanitary sewer service. If you go to page 5, paragraph C, 3C, it answers Mr. Chrisman's question. The authority shall appoint the township manager as manager of the authority. That is actually a new paragraph in that we did not have that in the original management agreement, but that's how we've operated it. Suffice it to say, though, this is complete for your action this evening. We're hoping that the authority will take action to approve this management agreement this evening, and that the Board of Supervisors can act to approve it at their meeting first Tuesday in December. I would like to point out the financials of the agreement, which are indicated on the last pages, authority members, paragraphs 11 and 12.
Page 10.
I'm working on a document that doesn't have the page numbers. But
Oh.
Yeah, it's points 11 and 12 is
Yeah.
where
Oh,
you're at,
11 and
Mr.
12. Okay, got 'em.
Mr. Wolf, right?
Yeah,
Thank
the-
you.
For sanitary sewer purposes, this is, the compensation to the township is 20% of indirect costs and, of course, 100% of direct costs. That 20% factor has been since 1997. I know Mr. Blaine indicated that we should do an actual study to determine what the indirect cost factor should be. Staff recognizes that. We do not have time to do that for this version of the agreement, but that is something that should be worked on as we move forward into 2019. And then for stormwater, that is paragraph 12. That is as was presented to you in the original, in the first amendment that you saw at your last meeting. Indirect costs are billed at 5%, and direct costs for stormwater services are billed at 100%. Again, staff also recognizes that a detailed study to determine whether that 5% figure is accurate or not is something that needs to be done. In my mind, I think it's fair, but could it be a little more or a little less? Absolutely, as well as the 20% figure could be a little more or a little less. I believe that's something that needs to be done as we move forward. Again, we don't have the time at this point in time to do it. I'll be happy to address any questions, as will Mr. Stein or Mr. Weaver, but we do believe that this document is complete for your action this evening, and if you so choose to entertain the township as a management provider for day-to-day operations of the Lower Paxton Township Authority, and you adopt this agreement, the supervisors will act at their next business meeting.
Mr. Wolf, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion or comments, concerns that you'd like to address with Mr. Wolf in regards to this new management agreement? Mr. Wolf, I mean, I appreciate the feedback on the comment on the 20% that I had last time, and I think it would be appropriate that as the year goes on in 2019, that we analyze what those indirect costs are that are being put into place by the township staff to help run the municipal authority, and just kind of continue to track and monitor that to see if that 20% is the right allocation or not.
And there's actually three analyses that need to be performed: the sewer portion to the township, the stormwater portion to the township, and then internally, the stormwater portion to the overall sewer, the authority operation fund. So you need three cost analyses to determine the actual percentage. The internal percentage, by the way, we estimated to be 20% as well, and that's what we've used for budgetary purposes, as we'll talk about when we do the budget.
Okay. Mr. Wolf, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the amendments to the management agreement with Lower Paxton Township.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the management agreement with LP, adding the stormwater operations and adding in the additional township administrative employees for sanitary sewer operation as presented by Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judd. Any further discussion? I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to go on to the sanitary sewer fund. First item of business will be action on the 2019 sanitary sewer fund budget. Mr. Weaver.
Yes,
Birthday
Mr.
boy.
Chairman,
There you go.
members of the board, thank you. As you recall, at the October 16th authority meeting, it was the consensus of the board to prepare the final budget with no sewer increase in 2019 based on the rate analysis presented by GHD and Susquehanna Advisors Group. In addition, the township did request Mr. Chairman Blaine and the members consider no rate increase in 19 with the proposed stormwater fee implementation. So the budget is complete and it's in final form. It's ready for board action. The estimated operation fund revenues are $17,498,767, with expenses at $16,529,860 for a projected surplus of $968,907 in 2019. Fund 37 capital expenditures are estimated at $4,059,000. So board members, just a highlight of a few things that I typically do between meetings, that things that have changed in the budget. There's only a few items, and it relates to our stormwater program. Following some meetings with Mr. Wolf and the Board of Supervisors, there was a need to update our webpage, also provide a notification service to customers. The supervisors authorized expenditures of $25,000 from the Board of Supervisors budget from the general fund. At the same time, it was recommended the authority pay their fair share, which is $20,000 for sewer and $5,000 for stormwater. So that is an addition to the budget that you didn't see in October. In addition, the stormwater fee will now require a PA1 call notifications to a third party to locate the stormwaters for the Public Works Department. They do not have an employee to locate the storm sewers. So in our end, we're splitting the cost with them. We had to add a fee in for a third party to locate the township one calls. In addition, we had the final budget from SWAT Air for their transmission and treatment expenses. That changed slightly. And we also got the final numbers from Harrisburg, which is now CRW. Now, they're not formally acting on their budget till tomorrow night, but we're pretty confident that that budget will be passed, and there's only a slight increase of 10 or 15 cents per 1,000 gallons. So overall, I'll be happy to explain any of those items, but essentially, with the revenues and expenses from the last meeting, there's only been a slight change in expenses and a slight change in revenues. And again, we're expecting a surplus of $968,000 next year. So that's a positive without raising sewer rates. A lot of that is based on development. Our tapping fees have increased a good bit, and our revenues for sewer rental with the increase in building. So again, the budget is in final form and ready for board action, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Weaver, thank you very much. Any questions by the board for Mr. Weaver? Mr. Weaver, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the surplus. That the reason, yes, we have a surplus, but that surplus is in our long-range projections is to be utilized and it will be used for future projects.
That's a good point. Yes, based on GHD's rate table for over a 15 to 20 year period and the assistance from our financial advisor, part of that surplus over time, over the next 5 to 10 years, will be to offset sewer rates and to provide for future debt service payments on the capital improvement program. Yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody understands that
Right.
the capital improvement program that we have in place is a program that we have planned out for a 15 to 20 year period. So we already have laid out where we're
Right.
going to be doing work and where that work's going to be for a significant period of time. And in order to fund those projects into the future, in order to keep rates at a reasonable level, there's going to be some points in time where you might have a surplus, and that surplus is going to be used in a future period. So, okay. With that being said, and no other questions, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2019 sanitary sewer fund budget.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the 2019 sanitary sewer fund budget as presented by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Christman, thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question. I thought of this. Mr. Weaver, just clarify. I know that we have the motion on the floor to approve the budget. Go back, if you will, to your discussion about SWATERA and their approval. That has little or no impact. I mean, I know it's going to happen. It has not happened. What's the worst case scenario?
The expenses are based on a average of 2018 consumption. So there's some fluctuation in there, and you're talking about pennies.
Right.
So it shouldn't affect the total overall expenses.
Okay. I didn't think it did, but for someone who may be watching or listening on
Right.
TV, they may suddenly raise a
Yes.
red flag and say, oh, maybe they shouldn't be doing this. So it really has little impact.
Little effect, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. With that being said, I think we can do this by voice acclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, next item of business, review of the proposed 2019 GHD Engineering Services Agreement. Mr. Whittle is not with you tonight?
No, Mr. Whittle is not. He was here for the last meeting to present the rates, and I
Okay.
think Alton and Mr. Weaver decided it was my turn to present tonight. So
Give him
good
the
evening.
night off.
Yeah,
I
good
just thought-
evening, ladies
Okay.
and gentlemen.
I thought perhaps our priority wasn't high enough for Alton. You can give him flack from me.
I will.
Thank you.
So yes, we're here to present our 2019 engineering budget for the sewer replacement program. And this year's budget is for $806,000. I would just note that is a decrease from last year's budget of $867,000, and also the fourth year in a row that our budget has actually decreased. I think that's of significance. We've already heard tonight a couple things about the program. It is very successful, and that decrease in our engineering budget is a result of that success. We've had a revised plan approved by DEP, and as a result, the sewer replacement projects have slowed down. And again, that's reflected in our decreased engineering budget. So I guess with that, I would just open it up to questions.
Any questions?
I don't really, Mr. Chairman, I don't really have a question, more or less just a comment that the overall rates and hourly rates seem pretty in line with industry standards right now. My professional opinion, pretty in line with what I've been dealing with the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too. I mean, I think your hourly rate increase was like 3 or 4%, right?
Yeah, it's just over 3.5%. You're correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. And your projection is that you're $806,000 of total fees for service for the year, which again is again 4 years in a row has come down, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think this year we're tracking to be very close to our budget for 2018. We took a very hard look at what it's been taking us to do these design projects, and using that to come up with the estimate for 2019.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I only have a comment also to say I appreciate that you have looked at everything that has to be done, and that you've done an excellent assessment in terms of what you're returning to us in a lesser amount of money that really helps our taxpayers. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2019 GHD Engineering Services Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we accept the 2019 GHD Engineering Services Agreement proposal as presented by GHD.
Mr. Chrisman, thank you very much. You're working hard tonight. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Eby. Any further discussion? All right, I think we can do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Congratulations, you're approved for 2019.
Yep, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And-
Next item of business, Resolution 180601 through 180650, authorizing condemnation of easements of private sewer replacements in the BC 2A, B, C, and BC 5B mini basin project. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. These are the standard condemnations for property owners who have not signed the private sewer replacement agreements for the BC2 project. The project has 600 private sewers, and staff has divided the properties into Group 1 and Group 2. These are the Group 2 condemnations. Group 2 has 364 properties, and 50 are still outstanding for agreements and temporary easements. Solicitor Stein needs 90 days to process the condemnations, and we are on schedule with GHD to bid this project in March of 2019. So at this time, staff is recommending that the list of 50 resolutions be passed for those properties that have not signed their private sewer replacement agreement, authorizing Solicitor Stein to begin the condemnation procedures. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Weaver, why do you think they don't sign them? I mean, this is a huge amount.
Yeah, well, in comparison to past projects, it's pretty much straight line with what we've seen, about 5 to 10%. So we have 650, so it looks like a lot more. It's just this project is about twice in size than what we typically do. So it appears to be a lot more, but it's really not when you look at it and compare it to what we've done over the last 15 years. The reason they don't sign, a lot of times people are just busy. They don't understand the mandatory part. They think it's elective, and we have changed that and clearly state in bold that this is a mandatory program. But a lot of people just think, hey, my sewer's working, I don't need this. So that's the big question I get asked. Like, thank you for the letter, but do I really need to sign? I don't want to participate. So.
Okay, Mr. Weaver, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions for Mr. Weaver? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve resolutions 2018-0601 through 2018-0650, which authorizes the condemnation of the easements for private sewer replacements in the BC-2A/BNC and BC-5B mini basin project as presented by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chrisman, thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Lindsay. Any further discussion? We will do this by voice vote as well. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Mr. DeSanto, I think you're up next. Action on Stray Winds Farm Sewer Maintenance Agreement.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just briefly, just to give some background, as requested by the board at the October 16th meeting, staff and GHD met with Solicitor Stein and Mr. DeSanto to prepare an acceptable resolution to the utility conflicts in the Stray Wind Farm development. The proposed maintenance agreement is recommended by staff and GHD and Solicitor Stein. The agreement provides for a letter of credit for $50,000 and a renewable $50,000 if the original letter of credit funds are depleted in the next 15 years. Again, Mr. DeSanto is here tonight. He can also answer any questions about the formation of this agreement. It was actually prepared by Mr. DeSanto with the assistance of GHD, myself, and Solicitor Stein. We've all reviewed the document, and we are recommending approval. The only other comment I need to make is it was recommended by GHD, and I believe a few of the board members, I can't remember who, that we do go out and televise the sewers before we act on any agreement with the developer. Jim and our staff have done that. The results weren't bad, but they weren't great either. We had some sags in some sewers, but it met the minimum deflection criteria for acceptance. So is it less than 5%, Tim?
I believe our specs have less than 5%. It's a certain size mandrel that it would have passed by.
Right. So Jim and Tim are available to answer any questions on the televising of the sewers, but at this time, the televising did not find any sewers that did not comply with our specifications. Although, again, it was disappointing to see that they had some sags in them. But that can happen. Our position is it really doesn't affect the sewer operation right now. And in 14 years, before this 15-year term expires, we're certainly going to be TVing those sewers again before the letter of credit expires to make sure that the condition of the sewer is the same. Mr. DeSanto, would you like to make any comments?
Why don't you come up, Mr. DeSanto?
Not getting off that.
Get some TV time, sir.
I had a question for Mr. Weaver. 50,000, is that enough?
Well,
How did you come up on the 50,000?
actually, Mr. DeSanto, I guess when it affects his pocketbook, he became an expert in sewers, and he did a lot of research for us that, frankly, I've never seen before. Life of sewers and the expected fail rate. So when you look at it on a percentage basis on our sewer system and what's been installed in the last 10 to 20 years and what the fail rate would be, there is some math to that number. And that's why staff does agree with that. The percentage of failure for that length of sewer that we're dedicating would result in less than 1%, believe it or not. So to replace a sewer length of, say, 400 feet, it's $50,000.
Okay. Even though there's a sag in it right now that we know.
Again, that's troubling, but it wasn't to the level that really upset us because you can have sags. It's, construction in life is not perfect, as we know, so you can have deficiencies in certain construction standards. Accept that. So, and again, we're going to check it in 14 years.
Okay.
But I'll let Mark expound upon his sewer research. I was impressed. But
And you'll be here in 14 years, Mark?
I hope so. Excuse me,
I
I'm
meant
fighting,
as a developer.
fighting a cold. If I'm not, I'm sure Triple Crown will be.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. DeSanto by the board at this point? Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I actually had a question for Mr. Weaver. You said you would televise again in 14 years.
correct.
There's no real clause in here that would indicate if there were problems from in 14 years that this agreement would be extended, or there would be, basically what you're saying is we're accepting the sewer lines as our own with this line of credit set up for 15 years.
Steve, maybe you can explain a little better, but we're not actually accepting the sewers yet. This is
Okay.
just the maintenance agreement part. The
Okay.
dedication of the sewers will come later, correct?
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
If I can expand upon that a little bit. That $50,000 is going to be there for the 15-year time frame. The reason to inspect 14 years from now is to see if there's any failures, which we don't believe will be happening, but that money's there then to be drawn upon. And then another 50,000 if that's not sufficient, which was twice the estimate that we came up with. But our next step will then to bring the actual dedication documents in front of this board for acceptance.
Okay. Mr. DeSanto, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the Streamland Farms sewer maintenance agreement?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the sewer maintenance agreement between Lower Paxton Township Authority and Triple Crown Corporation for Stray Winds Farm as presented by Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Christmas, thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion? Let's do this by roll call vote. Shelley, please.
Mr. Eby,
Aye.
Mrs. Lindsay,
Aye.
Mr. Blaine,
Aye.
Mr. Chrisman,
Aye.
Mr. Judd,
Aye.
Mr. Zumas?
Aye.
Motion approves unanimously. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you to the board, and thank you for the staff with working with us.
All right, on to township reports. Second consent decree update on current construction projects. Anybody from staff want to present?
Yeah, I'll handle this.
Tim's on it.
We have our map up here just for reference. As I go through these different projects, I'll point to those with my laser pointer and give you an idea of what area we're actually talking about. So, Chairman and members of the board, we have tonight in your packets the mini basin construction projects update. As always, feel free to interrupt me, or if something doesn't sound quite right, jump in. I'm just going to kind of breeze through some of this stuff and give you an update of everything that's occurred since our last meeting in September. So during the previous period, we had 3 active projects. 2 of those projects are now finished and are 100% complete and in various processes of being closed out. The first active project to talk about tonight is the mini basin PC4C4E. And that's this location right here, shown in green, kind of around the Paxtonia area. And what I have to report on that tonight is that the punch list is complete at this point. The project is in the process of being closed out. We've issued final payment, and we have really 2 highlights, 2 positives to report. The first is that the final contract value for this project came in $592,284.53 under the original contract value. So we're happy about that. We're also happy that the metering results, and the members that were on road tour earlier here tonight, you got to see some of our metering equipment. But the metering results were very favorable in these 2 mini basins. For PC4C, we demonstrated a removal of 96% of the excess I&I. And PC4E, it was a removal of 100%. So moving on to the second project, it's mini basin PC2A. That one's shown here in purple near the Colonial Country Club. And you'll probably remember this as our lining project. We're working with 2 separate contractors on 3 separate contracts. And I'll just briefly go through status of those 3 contracts, where things stand. You probably remember previous months, things weren't going very smoothly on this project. Contract number 1 is for mainline rehab, and the contractor is Able Recon. The work is completed at this point, but the contractor has 5 mains that have been lined that they haven't been able to get those to pass an air test based on the requirements in our specs. So rather than continue to cut out liner, reline, try to correct this defective work, they've come to us with a proposal to offer a credit for acceptance of defective work. I don't believe we really have a figure at this point. I know, Bill, in some of the meetings we had, it was discussed maybe in the 80 to 90% payment range is what they were considering for credit. But essentially, we would accept the defective work, which didn't pass an air test per our specs, and we would pay a reduced amount for the diminished value of that work.
So what do we do about those lines?
Yeah.
Well, the concern we had all through this process was that maybe those lines were leaking, so they were leaking air. It's been proven they were leaking air, but does that really necessarily equate to how much water they could be leaking? So when I say it's defective work, it's not like there's deficiencies in the pipe that are obvious or, structurally that something's wrong. It's just for whatever reason, they can't get these 5 lines to pass an air test per our spec.
So you think it's just more about just trying to get it to pass the test? It doesn't mean the standards, are that degraded or that it's
Well,
not.
there's two issues. The first being that our objective from staff level was to provide the board with a savings in lining. So this is a pilot project. So we wrote the spec to make it equivalent to lining. So we're on the learning curve here. This is the first pilot project we've ever done. So we're learning in the industry that there's an ASTM standard that is provided for lining. And legally, we could be challenged if we don't accept the sewer. If we reject it 100% and say you got to fix it, then there could be a challenge. We don't really think that's worth it because it does meet the ASTM standard for lining, but it doesn't meet our standard, which is equivalency to a new sewer pipe.
Okay, so we're still, like you said, we're
learning.
We're learning. And so
Yes.
it's not that we have to go out and find somebody else to give it a shot.
No, that's not the case. We have to work with Solicitor Stein, the engineer, our special contract counsel to figure out how we proceed with lining projects, how do we protect ourselves, try to get it as close to new pipe as we can. And that's going to be some learning curves, and we'll have to get back to the board before we do another job.
And Bill, why is our spec so different from what what they're allowing?
Well, we are in our consent decree. We have achieved, as Tim just pointed out in his last project report, 100% results in I-9 removal. So when you start allowing acceptance of below 100% pass, then that's a dangerous path to take because then you're allowing yourself a chance of failure. We don't like that, so that's a risk. But we're willing to do it on this project because it's a pilot project. So we're anxious to see what's this testing really mean in the long run when you look at the actual flow meter results.
The 5 lines, are they the ones at the country club, or are they in other residents' property? Whereabouts are they located?
They're all mains, and every single one, I think 4 of the 5 are in the larger diameter pipe near Goose Valley Road. One actually goes up toward the Colonial Country Club. That's an 8-inch line. But to get back to the kind of the standards, there's these ASTM standards that were developed, and some of them are developed, could have been 30 plus years ago. So like Bill said, our standard replacement spec takes a step further from there and is more stringent, and we don't have these types of issues with when we're out there, contractors putting in PVC pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't really anticipate going into this that we'd have this many issues with the lining.
Were we looking at other lining projects in the blues? Didn't we talk about, okay.
Our policy and recommendations to the board for lining outside of pilot projects is only on areas where there's significant cost increases for sewer replacement. So the PennDOT right-of-way is a 20% increase in our costs.
Right.
So our cost per foot for sewer replacement go from $300 a foot to $400 a foot. So we recommend lining those sewers.
Okay.
And we are working on the specs, and so you will see it soon when we do the next contract, which will be coming up in March. We'll be talking to you about those specs.
Okay.
And
You
this-
don't think
and
we'll
this
have
issue.
the trouble over there that we're having over by the country
Oh,
club?
we will.
We will?
We will,
Okay.
because what we're learning is that in some cases with the mainline lining, they don't always meet our 100% pass rate. And that's why there is some forgiveness in this standard, because it may not be equivalent to new pipe. But when you're saving 25 to 30% in construction costs, and you're saving $3 million and you're getting the same flow meter results, then staff is gonna recommend that you still do that, but we can't do that yet until we get these pilot test results back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And DEP just cares about the flow meter? Is that how we're graded?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Ultimate compliance is we have to eliminate the overload, and that is achieving, not 100%. So there's some give in there. I'd have to have GHD give you a report on exactly what that number is, but I think it's closer to 85 to 90. So we have a lot of play in there that we're still doing good, but you don't, once you start cracking the door.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
So on Goose Valley, where that's been tore up for a while, that's totally finished now? I haven't been out there for a while. On the backside of the country club.
The only thing to finish out there is part of contract 3 work, which is lining manholes.
Okay.
Everything else at this point has been completed out there.
Okay, because I know I've had a couple calls on, what was happening there on Goose Valley, because it was tore up for a while, so, okay. Thank you.
Any other contract 1 questions? Contract number 2 is for lateral lining. Similar process. This contractor is Mr. Rehab Incorporated. To date, they've lined all the laterals, and we've accepted 36 of 46 total for payment. So they have 10 remaining, and of the 10, it's an even split. 5 lateral liners. They said, no questions. We understand there's something wrong here. We need to fix it. And they're in the process of doing that. The other 5, they've taken the stance that there's and some of the information here you can see the actual diagram of the T-liner, but there's a little hydrophilic gasket seal that sits at the terminal point of the liner as it goes into the main. So their claim with these 5 other laterals is that that gasket seal hasn't come in contact with water at this point, and it will not swell up and fill that void until it comes into contact with water. Of course, that's sort of hard to prove one way or the other. I would think this year, with all the rain we had and the groundwater conditions, that one's a little hard for me to believe. But we're working through that with them. I would say after we address these 5 that they've taken responsibility for, we'll get together and have a progress meeting and come up with a solution to get that project closed out.
Just one comment, board members. It's the exact same issue for this contract. You have a ASTM standard for laterals that doesn't meet our standard for 100% pass. This contractor is being a little more difficult initially. What Tim's telling me is that they don't want to give it credit at all if they meet the ASTM, but that's not what our spec says. So I'm hoping we can meet a resolution there and make a recommendation for the board with a change order sometime in January. So we'll have to keep you posted on that, but initially, they're not being as cooperative as the contractor under contract 1.
And that's Mr. Rehab that you're dealing with, right?
Right.
Okay. And we've used him before, right?
Yes, it's just what Tim pointed out, this swelling theory. They've actually done lab analysis, and they have videos, and, Tim and I have talked about this. Some of the stuff, you can look at all the science, but a lot of the common sense stuff, it just doesn't pass the eye test. But he has an argument, too, because some of the ones that initially failed, he went back and he got them to pass. So you just don't know what to believe, but this doesn't make sense, as Tim said, that it hasn't been wet enough for this seal to swell. So,
So is it?
it's not that important. The bottom line is the flow meter, again, it all comes back to the flow metering results. That's really, I just want to focus on that issue. It's a pilot program. once we get the test results back, there's just going to have to be some decisions by the board on what credit you're willing to accept.
Okay.
Bill, is that simply his insurance that he doesn't want to give anything at this point because he's waiting to?
I hate to speculate what their business plan is there.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to stand by their case that it's going to swell eventually and it's going to pass. So I guess if they waver from that, then it wouldn't look good. So
I just wonder how much more rain they need.
yeah, can't get much wetter.
Why, yeah. Especially the past couple days.
Contract number 3 is for manhole lining, and this contractor is Able Recon. To date, they have probably between 5 and 7 manholes left to line. And similar to the contract 2, work of contract 3 has been held up by the work of contract 1. So when we're doing these lining projects, you're first you line the mains, then you line the laterals, then you line the manholes. So there were defective mains in contract 1, which kind of held up contract 2 and also held up contract 3. So they do expect to complete all their work by the end of 2018, and we'll issue a time extension. The last project I have for you tonight is the 2018 sanitary sewer project. This is in various locations throughout the township. Brad, if you can just pull it up just a little bit. There it is. So, but the bulk of the work is here at the near the Sheets property on Linglestown Road. This is Colonial, this is Linglestown. The contractor for this project was JOA and Bradley. All work is completed at this point, and the final payment will be issued in December. Not as good of news as far as the final contract value as we had on 4C, 4E. The final contract value for this one is going to come in about $192,000 over the original. I have the reasons down there. I can certainly go through each one if the board would like.
I was going to say only the one that's specific for you that you think is important that we should really emphasize and be aware of.
I mean, we had 2 change orders on this project. The first change order was $23,000. That was a change for use of ductile iron pipe going across the driveway entrance at the Forest Hills Commons commercial development.
And again, that wasn't anticipated.
It wasn't anticipated. Well, we had a alternate bid price for a casing pipe that was $54,000, and all it would cover was like a short distance through the driveway entrance. So rather than pay $54,000, we threw that bid out and changed the contract to add $23,000 to protect, use the ductile iron on a much longer length. Change order 2 was in the amount of $115,500, and this change, a lot of you will remember, was due to the conflict encountered with the 24-inch diameter water main along Linglestown Road there at Forest Lane. Sewer couldn't be constructed as designed due to the conflict, and long story short, we had to cross Linglestown Road an additional time due to that. Third and final, I would say, major item was just the unmarked and mismarked utilities. We have this on every one of our projects, but in accordance with the PA1 Call Act, the project owner, which is us, is responsible for compensating the contractor downtime associated with locating the utilities when another utility marks their utility incorrectly or doesn't mark it at all. So that's all I have for my report. I can answer any questions you might have.
Tim, do we pay for that PA1 call?
Yeah, PA1 Call is a service. We're a member of it, And then we're a member, we mark our facilities. What I was talking about is other, like, not to pick on anyone, but the water company comes out, marks their line, marks it incorrectly, and it's like 6 feet off the mark, and the contractor's digging around where they
Right.
marked it.
Yeah, it's not his fault, but why are they so lax that things are mismarked? Because this isn't the
not-
first time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, issues with records, where stuff is, and just not having accurate locations on stuff.
It's not fair to the contractor.
Well, we're the ones that have to
Right.
end up
yeah.
paying for the project
Right,
owner.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I take it that's it for your report on projects at this point?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit then about the Penvest application update for BC2A, BC, BC5B project.
Yes.
In the award and bid schedule. Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chairman, I have actually just 3 township reports that'll be really brief because we do have a whole stormwater fund discussion and they're waiting patiently. So just real quick, I wanted to give you the update since the last meeting. GHD did complete the Penvest application on time. It was submitted by the October 31st deadline. The application is $13.5 million. $3.5 million would be unfunded Penvest money, which is not approved by them, which is basically the private sewer and specific paving. So our total sewer cost at this point is right around $17 million. Now we are working with HRG about the next item of the authority business, which is the stormwater fund. They are going to be tag teaming with our sewer project, and their costs are around $3.1 million at this point. So our project is looking close to $20 million. I'll be happy to answer any questions on that item.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver? All right, Mr. Weaver, why don't you move on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Update on the CRWIMA and the 2017 true-up. These items have unfortunately been stagnant for a while because there's been some CRW staff changes over the last year. They've gone through 2 different CEOs, and the CFO is also no longer there. So it kind of hinders the negotiation of the IMA. So we're a little disappointed because it does create a lot of confusion on how we pay our bills. Specifically for my report tonight is I did receive an email on November 20th, along with Mr. Wolf, that the proposed sewer rates would be acted on, which I did present as part of the budget. The other part of that is the 2017 true-up has been calculated. They have estimated that the Lower Paxton Township true-up is in the amount of $1,274,182. Payment of this credit will be netted against any outstanding AR balances for 2017. As you're aware, the authority does have a outstanding AR balance because there's a discrepancy between the parties, CRW and Lower Paxton Township Authority, on the method of billing. It's been recommended by our council to base our bills on the agreement, which is by water consumption, and they calculated our bills at a flat EDU rate, and there lies the difference in the AR for 2017. So I will be meeting with Solicitor Stein, our special counsel, and after that meeting, they will be providing information to the board, which most likely will be legal advice, which would mean an executive session on December 11th, which we are looking at a potential joint authority meeting. I'll be happy to answer any questions on that item.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver on that item?
Is this, this seems like a pretty big deal. Is this?
$1 million, yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's why I put it on the report. Didn't want to leave that one go by.
Have we had these kinds of disagreements in the past?
Basically every year for the last 20 years.
Yeah? I mean, on the nature of billing?
I'm being facetious.
Right.
I apologize.
Well, with all that money, I'm sure there's a lot of disagreements.
Yes. So we've had disagreements because the IMA has not been finalized, and different parties are paying on different methods, and it's really confusing for everybody. So This is the most important issue right now, is getting an agreement that all the parties agree to pay by the same method, because you have to go back and calculate and do true ups and do all kind of accounting, which is a lot of work that wouldn't be needed if we just agreed to pay at the same rate. That's really the long and short of it. We're hoping to accomplish all that next year once they get a stable staff that we can meet with.
That'll help. That'll help.
Right. I didn't mean to come across as.
No,
No, you
we
did.
all understand that.
I'm just pointing out the fact that they don't have a stable staff right now, but they do have an acting CEO, and I'm hearing good things about them, so I'm hoping that things go well.
I hope you're accurate, Mr. Weaver,
Okay.
since we know what that status has been like for the last 20 years.
Right.
Mr. Weaver, but you and Solicitor Stein and other legal counsel will be giving us a full report on this matter on our December 11th joint meeting.
We will.
Okay, sounds good. You want to talk about the street paving analysis provided to the township?
Yes,
There.
Mr. Chairman, board members, again, to be brief, this is just information because the authority certainly does pay for these improvements over the last 15 years for our capital improvement plan. Obviously, the authority does not own the road system, but as part of the township analysis, Mr. Wolf requested the authority provide total dollars spent over the last 15 years since the program started, and how much we're going to spend in the future, and also how many miles we paved to assist the township in their paving analysis over the next, how many years was it, George? 25 years. So GHD pulled that together for George and myself pretty quick. It's in your packet. So we have paved, since inception of the program, 42 miles of sewer. I was surprised that was that much. And I apologize. Let me find the cost here. That was $19,093,000. Going forward, we have 16 miles remaining, and the estimated cost for that is $15,527,000. George, do you want to make a comment about that? I think that helped you because it showed that the township is actually on schedule in their paving of so many miles a year. Yes, it did. What's that? Yes, it did. Yeah.
There's no need to make any other comment
Yeah.
on it. Obviously, we've all been aware that part of the infiltration and infill program and the reconstruction of our sanitary sewers has caused a need to restore conditions, which means paving streets. And we have done a lot of sanitary sewer work, which means we've also reconstructed a lot of streets. The quantity is large, and we were never completely sure what it was until we did this analysis.
And just one last comment, unrelated. Just moving forward, we have another component now with HRG and the storm sewer system that the authority is going to be taking on. As part of that, there's going to be a lot of analysis on street paving for this next project, and we'll be able to give you a report about that when we do the bidding. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver? All right, hearing none, let's go to the engineer's report.
Mr. Chairman, real quickly,
Yes, sir.
I apologize. I do have to get going. I just wanted to make a note that I reviewed all the stuff with the stormwater and don't have any additional comments. So wish you the best of luck with the rest of the meeting.
Mr. Eby, thank you for the luck. Appreciate it.
Gee, thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman Blaine.
Yes, sir.
Board members, you have before you GHD's engineers report for the September through November 2018 period. Over the last 3 months, we've done a number of things as reported, but I would say the most significant effort that we spent over the last 3 months was on the BC 2A, 2B, 2C, and 5D project. Back in October last month, we spent probably most of the month working with Mr. Weaver and his staff on putting the Penvest application together that he told you about. And now we're trying to finish up the design, working with Mr. Klein and HRG on incorporating the stormwater into it, and we'll continue doing that probably for the next 3 months, I would say, until we're getting ready to go out to bid. With that, I'll just ask if anybody has any questions about our engineer's report.
Any questions on the engineer's report? All right, hearing none. Thank you. Appreciate it. You go home, have a beer, take it easy. All right, let's move on to the Stormwater Fund. So the first thing we're going to do is continued review of the proposed 2019 Stormwater Fund budget. Mr. Wolf, you're
Yes,
back up
Mr.
again.
Chairman, board members.
I thought you were retired.
Almost.
All right.
As we close out the year, we are presenting to you again the 2019 Stormwater Fund budget. This budget is a fine-tuned version of what you have previously seen. We're not asking for action on the budget tonight. You'll notice below the budget on the agenda is a review of a rate resolution. We did not include that within your packet because that is not in final form yet. Nor is Raftelis's analysis on the and final recommendation on the stormwater fee. As this all moves together, and before I jump into the budget in and of itself, and Mr. Weaver has noted, we are going to request that the authority and the Board of Supervisors hold a joint meeting on December 11th. We'll have Raftelis in attendance at that meeting. They will make a final presentation of their Phase 2 product. They will also answer a question of the Board of Supervisors in regard to a credit program for the non-residential properties that will be billed a stormwater fee in the township. So the process is still developing. We're not actually asking for items at this point in time on either the budget, the rate resolution, or the final fee that will be established. However, I wanted to give you an update on each one of these this evening. Moving on further with the budget, board members, the stormwater budget for 2019 expects revenues of $2,612,720. This will be based upon a equivalent residential unit fee of $128 per year that will be billed for 2 quarters in 2019. The third and the fourth quarters of the year. We will not bill in the first and the second quarters of the year. That will raise a little less than $2,100,000 in revenue, and we are expecting to bill almost 33,000 equivalent residential units throughout Lower Paxton Township. In addition to the stormwater fee revenue, there is a revenue anticipation loan also listed within the revenue portion of the budget. Again, budget total for revenues is $2.6 million in 2019. Expenditures in 2019 for operations, $2,490,014. Again, very similar numbers to what you have already seen. The management reimbursement to the township and the management reimbursement to the sewer operations, again, management reimbursement to the township is at 5% of indirect costs. There is an exhibit attached to the budget which indicates those costs. Management reimbursement to the authority is at 20% of overall costs. There is an exhibit attached to the end of the budget for the 20% reimbursement between the sanitary sewer fund and the stormwater fund. And then we have direct costs for operations and administration and direct costs for operations. When it talks to operations facility, that's stormwater portion of the Township Public Works operation. Finally, there is debt service, which includes short-term borrowing and anticipated long-term borrowing, which, as I've said before, I would expect that the authority would, through general obligation bond of the township and a subsidy agreement, borrow $7 million in the fall of 2019 to fund ongoing stormwater projects. Again, budget for operations is expenditures roughly $2.5 million. Any questions on revenues and expenditures for operations for 2019? If not, I would like to move further into the capital budget. We have a capital budget for 2019 of $2,249,000. And this capital budget will be changing, board members. The capital budget includes the engineering retainer, which was estimated at the time at $40,000, stormwater construction projects of $1.5 million, restoration project at $590,000, and Paxton Creek TMDL expenses estimated at $159,000. Since we've put this budget together, and Bill has previously referenced the BC to A, B, and C projects, which will be a $20 million overall project, a $3.1 million stormwater project. And it doesn't appear that that project will have stormwater expenses in 2019, which is what we had originally estimated our $1.5 million expenditure on. Mr. Klein, Jeff Klein, Public Works Director, who's in attendance, has been working with HRG, and he would like to advance projects already in our capital program for stormwater, and he has a proposed expenditure which will be approximately $1.7 million for capital projects in 2019, prior to the BC2 A, B, and C projects. So, from a dollar perspective, the capital budget remains at roughly $2.3 million for 2019. In that quick summary, I would like to point out that if the board, if the authority authorizes $1.7 million in capital expenditures in 2019, plus the BC2 A, B, and C project, which is 3.1, plus the Stonebridge project, you're expending roughly $6 million of stormwater funds on already identified capital projects in the first 3 years. So as you move forward into 2019 and stormwater begins to grow and mature, that $7 million recommendation that I've made to this body and the Board of Supervisors for stormwater projects for the next 3 years not only looks good, may actually be a little bit light. That completes my summary of the budget. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them. If not, I just again like to note that the supervisors are still entertaining, before they make a recommendation to this body on a final stormwater fee, they're still entertaining discussion on a non-residential credit program, which we'll discuss on the 11th. And also on the 11th, we hope to have a final presentation of the Phase 2 work by Raf Tellis, our stormwater consultant. That's all I have for you this evening, authority members.
Mr. Weaver, thank you. Or Mr. Wolf, thank you. Mr. Wolf, I do have one question for you.
Yes.
On the very last page of this analysis, the authority management reimbursement due to the township, it says fiscal year 2012.
That page came out when you may need to refresh. That is a page that got stuck into our document by mistake. Shelley took it out this afternoon.
Okay.
When we caught it in there. So you were looking at the packet prior to us taking it out.
Okay, I was just curious when I saw that, so.
No problem.
And you were probably thinking to yourself, someone's going to catch that and find that, and dang it. So, all right. Any questions for Mr. Wolf on the budget as proposed at this point in time?
Yeah, I just have a quick basic question, just for clarification and understanding. Since this is not implemented till third quarter for payment, correct?
Correct.
But the fiscal year for this will be the same as January, or will the fiscal year be different because of implementation? Implementation
no.
will have no bearing on fiscal year.
Correct. Authority's
Okay.
fiscal year is
We're just
January
not
to December.
implementing till third quarter.
Correct.
Okay. And even though we will be approving the budget prior to January 1.
Correct. I would
Okay.
hope so.
I just want to make sure that I have the sequencing and understanding, again, if people are watching, that they understand that we have to actually approve the budget prior to January 1, because our fiscal year runs January 1 to December. The actual implementation is not going to occur till third quarter.
Correct. Well, no,
The taxpayer's not going
For
to
the
see anything
taxpayers,
till the
yes.
third pay.
However, the
I should
town-
have restated that, or stated
the
it.
township will begin billing the authority for services in January,
Right.
1/1 of 19.
But a resident will not see the impact of this until third quarter.
Correct.
I should have stated it that way. I'm sorry, that was my fault for not.
Yeah, what has taken place, board members, is your articles of incorporation have been amended. The management agreement has been acted upon by this body. It will be acted upon by the Board of Supervisors on the 4th. Then both bodies will meet, entertain the final presentation from the consultant. The supervisors will recommend a rate structure. They'll give that to the authority. Hopefully, the authority will adopt that, and then we'll be able to adopt its budget. At that point, we'll be in a position to go live 1/1/19 for operations, and then billing 7/1/19.
Thank you for the clarification. Because I know that people watching are going to not quite understand it. So thank you for the clarification, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wolf, thank you very much. I don't think there's any action needed on that, as it's just proposed at this point. We still have a joint meeting to go to between the supervisors and the authority. So the next item then will be review of a draft resolution to establish stormwater fund rates. You covered that, so we're good there. All right, we're good. We have that all covered. We're down to HRG's engineering services agreement. Mr. Kenworthy. So Mr. Kenworthy, why don't you tell everybody what your promoted new position is at HRG, as seen on the Central Penn Business Journal and other news outlets?
Thank you, Chairman Blaine. I appreciate you pointing that out, that on January 1, I will become the Chief Operating Officer of Herbert, Rowland, and Grubik.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will let the township folks know my positions here at the township will remain unchanged.
That's the best news.
Thank you.
The township couldn't ask for a better person to have here other than having the president, or now he'll be the chairman, right, Mr. Grubik?
He will be chairman of the board and CEO. We will have a new president at Herbert, Rowland, and Grubik. Jason
Chairman of the
Freilich
board,
is his
CEO,
name.
Mr. Grubik. Okay. All right, Mr. Kenworthy, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your proposed service agreement?
Sure. It's a very basic retainer agreement. There are two parts to it. One, retainer services for a basic lump sum fee. A second component, as the authority would be interested in assigning projects to us, we would provide scope, schedule, and budget to complete those tasks on an as-needed basis. We did not provide, we have some budget items in there. As you can see, the attachment 1 indicates $70,000, $30,000 in the operations, and $40,000 in the capital areas. Essentially, that was identified by Mr. Weaver or others in the budget for this year. So we will work within those parameters. As stated, we are finishing up some items with the township itself and Public Works Department. So again, very basic retainer agreement. Be happy to answer any questions you may have on that.
Are there any issues here for future COO, Mr. Kenworthy?
I think the agreement's the same as last year, isn't it?
Well, this is a new agreement. It is
Right, I
based
know it's a new
completely
agreement,
on
but
the township.
I'm talking about the content, Andrew.
Right, this is a new agreement with the authority, as
Right.
HRG is not hired by the authority yet until this happens.
Right.
The agreement looks exactly the same for some very minor changes as we have our agreement with the township.
That's okay. That's what.
Authority members, we presented this, this is the first time you've seen a stormwater engineer engineering agreement. We wanted you to have this to look at and certainly act upon at some point in time. I just checked with Mr. Stein, though. I'm not sure you're in a position tonight to act because you don't have a budget yet to spend money.
Oh, that's true.
So,
Good point.
I was gonna-
That's a very good point.
Well, I actually was going to recommend that we hold on acting on this until we have our joint meeting on the 11th, and then we know what the final budget actually is, and then act on, just like we did with the with the sewer fund, act on both the budget and the engineers agreement all at the same time. I mean, that
I
just,
think
to me, would make the most sense and would be the most logical approach. Is everybody here in agreement with that?
Absolutely. Gives Andrew
Okay.
an opportunity to sharpen his pencil.
Mr. Crispin, do you want to address anything here, Mr. Crispin? Wow, to allow him to sharpen the pencil real quick.
No, Andrew knows my feelings, so thank you.
I'm well aware, thank you.
All right. Actually, when you look at the rates are pretty consistent.
Yes.
With GHD's rates.
I just
so,
want to make sure that we're consistent across, between Township Authority and now this.
All right. Okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Kenworthy at this point in time? Okay, then I guess then again, the plan will be that on December 11th, during the joint meeting, or after the joint meeting, the authority then can meet and act on proposing the final budget and then approving the engineering agreement with HRG. And if there's any questions or concerns between now and then, you can, there's issues we can address at that time. Okay?
Or if Andrew has any changes.
Yes, exactly. Or if Mr. Kenworthy and HRG want to come back with any changes. Maybe Mr. Grubik wants to come next time.
I will speak with him.
All right.
Thank
okay. Moving on to township reports. BC2A, BC stormwater project, projected start of the stormwater construction. Anything we need to add there, or we've covered all that at this point?
no, just to repeat, the stormwater spend is estimated to be $3.1 million, and we expect that to begin now in 2000. Although the project will start in 2019, the stormwater portion won't begin until 2020.
Okay. All right, with that, next meeting, the next full authority meeting, municipal authority meeting will be February 26, 2019. Between then, in the interim, there will be again a joint meeting between the Board of Supervisors and the Lower Paxton Township Authority to further discuss the stormwater rates, the budget, and do final approval on the budget and HRG's proposal. With that being said, is there any further comments from staff? Any further comments from any members of the authority board?
Mr. Blaine, that December the 11th, that'll be at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock?
Yes, it will be at 7. You'll have an executive session at 6 o'clock with Scott Weiland to discuss the Harrisburg true-up issue. And then we'll have, that's usually the Board of Supervisors workshop meeting. So we'll do it as a combined board authority meeting with those agenda items first, followed by any leftover Board of Supervisors workshop meetings thereafter.
I just wanted
Okay.
the public to know what the time was. Yeah.
Any further comments from board members? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Adjourned.
Thanks, guys, for the tour.